I hope you've enjoyed the manager conversations today. I hope you learned a bit from our morning panel with Rory Sutherland talking about the different ways you can use alchemy to present things in a different way to people and maybe make your clients think about the world in a different way that actually could be helpful. So here we go. This is a very exciting moment. This is sort of, we've had four days before, but this might be the peak of it. This is our panel. We're going to talk about the opportunities in the Western region, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. We have Shannon Yusi, CEO and founder of Beacon Point Advisors; Erica Coogan, partner in charge of wealth management at Moss Adams; Scott Steele, senior vice president of network development at Dynasty Financial Partners; and Nick Hilaris, president of Metros Capital. Welcome everyone to the panel today. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
We're going to start with a bit of a hot topic, which is something that is being termed the California exodus. The idea that people are leaving California for other maybe lower tax climes, if you will. So kind of want to talk about whether that's happening, the extent to which it's happening, and what it means for advisors who happen to be based out in the West or looking to start operations in the West. So to give us a broad picture of what's going on, maybe we'll go to you, Nick Hilaris, who you're an expert on real estate and also on the economy. So you have a really good picture of how money is moving across the country.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here with all of you and with my fellow panelists. This is a really interesting question. It's something that I've been thinking about for basically a year, because the exodus started manifesting sort of very early on in the pandemic. So within a few weeks of the lockdowns, we started to see sort of massive changes in a certain demographic. It was essentially the first move out of California was young people. And it was a very large group of people. There were estimates, I haven't seen them in a while, but the estimates in the summertime was that over 1 million young people left the cities, and the cities in California in particular were hard hit. And so you started to see stories about this with people reporting about the one-way U-Haul moves, and surveys were done. And, they've done, like the Pew Research Group has done some studies. I mean, it was massive. Like the number of young people living at home went from like 47%, which is already really high, to well over 50. And most of these move outs occurred from places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and to a lesser extent, some places in Seattle area, but also New York City. So the California exodus started early. It started with young people. And as the coronavirus pandemic kind of evolved and things changed, and the dynamic politically got sort of more and more in the public eye, there was another wave of movement that started, another wave of migration. And this wave of migration is much more about bigger issues like taxation policy, the governance systems in place in these large metropolitan regions, and public safety. We had a number of occasions throughout the year where there were social unrest in the cities, and these things, the pandemic, the lockdowns, they changed something about the psychology of America in a big way. And they've unleashed some positive forces in the economy, like the return to home buying, for example, which in my view, I think is positive. But they've also unleashed some things which, from the perspective of the big growth centers, like our urban centers, which have been driving GDP growth, they've caused some problems. And we have seen people move out. And high taxpayers are moving out now, and that's the biggest concern. I know it's real. So the question of whether it's real, I know it's real for this one reason. In March of last year, I'm part of this group called the LA Coalition, which is basically like a bunch of civic activists. And in March of last year, I had a call with a bunch of the elected officials locally here. And the topic of migration came out, and everyone was like, oh no, this is not a big deal. California is always going to attract people. This is the tech center of the world. I had a call about 2 weeks ago, and the tune had changed completely, and everybody is scared. The elected officials are absolutely petrified because they've looked under the hood at the tax numbers, and they realize the vulnerability of these cities and the states out here in the West. And they looked at the headlines of all the companies, and so it's definitely real. It's definitely a threat, and it's changing things.
Yeah, so Shannon, you have a pretty good view of this because Beacon Point is obviously based in California, but has offices not only across the West, but really all across the country. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing. I mean, many of our high net worth clients are looking to move out of California, so we're certainly doing a lot of planning around clients leaving the state. I mean, look, when you've got a state at a 13+% tax rate, saying they're going to go to a 16+% tax rate, you're going to have movement within the state. I do think, though, it continues to surprise me, though. And Nick, maybe you can address this, but home prices in California still remain very high, and people are still moving into California, maybe out of the bigger cities and coming into the suburbs, which is keeping those prices up pretty high. But I've been continually impressed or surprised maybe by the movement with home prices in California. But as it relates to our clients, we are seeing growth in our offices in California. So not maybe a little bit surprising based on the statistics, but we're seeing massive growth in some other areas on the West Coast that are seeing clients come inbound into the state, such as Arizona.
And Erica, what are you seeing over at Moss Adams?
Yeah, so we've pre-pandemic, we've always had a team that works with folks to actually move out of the state of California, and this is strictly tax-based on if they're selling a business, then how can we think about good strategies to defer that taxation and or move it to a different state where it's not taxed at all. So that's not different with the pandemic, but we're definitely seeing, I think both as Nick and Shannon said, we're definitely seeing a rise in the need, the desire to want to shift outside of state. And I think that was an interesting point that was made earlier, that hasn't been on folks' radar, and now from a political standpoint, and now it is actually starting to get on the radar. So I personally, I'm based out of Seattle, Washington, and we're seeing folks move out of Seattle into the suburbs, kind of as Shannon alluded to, and it's driving local city policy very differently because we have to factor, as an example, Amazon is now going to be building in Bellevue, Washington versus Seattle, Washington. And so we have to factor in new population growth and what does that mean for the sustainability of our cities. And so the landscape's changing, I think, very rapidly on that front, whether it's California or, again, big metro versus smaller suburban sides.
Yeah, and Scott, you have a great view at Dynasty. Obviously, firms around the country. Is this something, this migration, something that's affecting the businesses that are actually based in places like, we're talking about LA and San Francisco, but also obviously New York City and places like that? Is it starting to affect the firms themselves?
Yeah, it is. But I would say, just not to sound cold about it, but it's a tremendous opportunity for RIAs that can deliver completely objective advice, and especially tax advice here in California, and advanced tax planning strategies. But I can tell you from a personal standpoint, the migration, we lived it in our family. We have two married daughters, and both of them migrated out of major metropolitan areas, one out of San Francisco down to Central Cal in Atascadero, and then one out of Seattle, Erica, to Bellingham, Washington. And the Seattle pair never could have purchased even a condominium in Seattle, and they wound up getting a house, buying it up in Bellingham, and they got 5 acres too. So, there is this small town, and Nick, you could probably speak to this more than I can, but this small town, Boise, Idaho, places in Nevada, Montana, that are starting to grow because people are leaving California and going. As far as it pertains to our business, one thing that we've seen on the positive side is that, and Shannon, you probably have seen this too, is that clients are available. So if we have a breakaway team that wants to launch, and they're going to launch their own business on the Dynasty platform, we've been doing everything remotely, including introducing them to our firm and getting them onboarded on our firm, and then everything, the underlying clients are now okay with doing everything electronically. DocuSign, for example. We've had some big firms, $1 billion plus, that were created and transferred all of their book within 10 weeks. So it's been an interesting phenomenon, and not to go down the rabbit hole, but it seems like behavior change is sometimes the hardest thing to create, and I feel like the pandemic kind of created a behavior change with us here in America, and that now we're all willing to do things remotely that we weren't willing to do before, and we're all willing to sign on a screen, and weren't willing to do that unless it was in hard copy and in writing and with a pen. So it's a very interesting thing to step away from and observe in terms of just overall behavior, but it's been a net positive. We're incredibly busy right now in terms of launches and M&A.
It's interesting. In this morning session, Rory Sutherland was saying that the impact of Zoom is like 10 times bigger than people might think. And I know, Shannon, you're already at your firm of Beacon Point thinking about the impacts of this kind of change, not only in location, but also in behavior.
Yeah, so it's interesting what Scott said, is they're, seeing tremendous growth. And we have never grown so fast than during this pandemic. So I think it's an interesting change in the business, but potentially a really good change in the business, where we had to go and, be in person for any, M&A transaction, or, meeting with prospective offices, or even meeting directly with clients. Now, I mean, I am scheduled on a half hour in Zoom calls, which is amazing, right? So you've taken out all that travel time. And now I think from a competitive landscape, I think it just intensifies the competitive landscape. It really doesn't matter where you're located. If you're located on the West Coast, the East Coast, if you've moved to Incline Village, or if you've moved to Boise, Idaho, I think the ability for you to compete and to grow your particular business has just expanded. I think if you've got a particular niche in your business, I think that's really going to just give you more runway, because now you can expand that across the country.
Yeah, and thinking about the West more generally as well, it's funny because Erica, your firm on the website says in big letters, "Rise with the West." So maybe you could just speak a bit about what you see in the West in general, and how you think about the wealth management industry there.
Sure, I think, and I'm sure all of my fellow panelists would agree. It's the concept or the culture about the West in terms of being innovative. How are we thinking forward, and being inspirational with recruitment of talent, how we go to market, how we bring in folks. I feel like there is something, or there's an element of that kind of West experience that we bring to bear, and we're trying to tap into that without it being 100% logistic, because there's all of that on the East Coast as well, and in between. But yeah, no, that's definitely an energy or a light that we're following and are pathing there, to both serve clients holistically. And so if we're talking about kind of the evolution of the RIA business, how are we thinking about what else are their needs? So we've brought in, actually, we just merged in, I guess about 2 years ago, a family office offering for super ultra high net worth clients. Or how are we bringing in tax? How are we bringing in real estate advisory? How are we bringing in all these things that if you are a client out on the West Coast and saying, hey, here's what I need, do we have the right resources and infrastructure to be able to serve those folks, has been a huge dedication of ours in the last couple of years.
Interesting. And Nick, so to drill down a little more on the real estate question in terms of where there are opportunities, I actually just want to read, this is from a Case Schiller report, the managing director of Index Investment Strategy at S&P, saying the data are consistent with the view that COVID has encouraged potential buyers to move from urban apartments to suburban homes. This may indicate a secular shift in housing demand, or may simply represent acceleration of moves that would have taken place over the next several years anyway. So as we continue to talk about this question of an exodus from California, I'm curious, Nick, if you, and from cities in particular, I'm curious, Nick, what your view is in terms of, are we seeing an acceleration of something that was happening anyway, or is there truly a shift in the culture?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot over the last year, and my own view is I think it skews more towards an acceleration of trends than a transformational view on, the urban lifestyle, because I do think that is a little overplayed in the media, and these cities are going to get back to normal, and the desire for the experiences that they provide and the opportunities that they provide will come back. There's definitely been a change of mindset and it came up in the conversation just a second ago with Scott and Shannon about even the use of technology and things like that within RIA firms, and the demand for RIA services seems to be increased. Like there's been a fundamental transformation, I think, of that mindset of people thinking seriously about their life situation. So I think COVID, it's a natural psychological response. Like you're stuck at home, the world is shut down, it's very scary. So like all of a sudden you start to think about like, okay, where am I living? Where are my kids going to school? What's the trajectory of my life? So I think these conversations are very naturally changing and coming to the forefront of people's minds. And I do think, with these impossibly expensive urban centers, there was a bunch of families that were on their way to moving out of the cities that, as a result of COVID, they just said, you know what, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And anecdotally, I have a lot of evidence of this. Like people are taking risks with buying houses for prices that they probably shouldn't pay. They're borrowing money from their friends and family for the down payment to get out and get space for their families, get access to schools that are actually open. So things are happening, but in my view, those would have happened anyways. The cities were essentially, for about a decade, the cities were thriving based on two things: immigration and young people coming to the cities. And we had a little pause on the immigration because we had a different kind of viewpoint in the White House for a while, but I think that's changing. And I think the young people come back. So I think we're going to see kind of in a weird way, like a Goldilocks. Like there's 10 years of pent up demand for housing because we're still recovering from the housing boom. And then the cities are going to come flourishing back as soon as we beat this pandemic.
Shannon, I'm curious your view on some of what Nick said.
Well, I just think one of the things he said that I thought was really interesting were the conversations are changing. So, right, the conversations in the home are changing. And maybe it's because, both spouses are home and finally having a chance to have the conversation about, what are we going to do with the next 10 years of our life? Are we going to move? Or, what do we want to do with our children? I can tell you from just a personal standpoint, those conversations are now being had more, and the time to be able to, plan and financially plan and plan your estate and make sure that you're tax planning appropriately. I think those have come to the forefront in family homes during this environment. I think it's a really great thing. What an opportunity for the RIA space, because those conversations are percolating to the top. And maybe this is a chance in a decade where, because those conversations are happening, we have the ability really to reach inside our clients' homes, and they're right inside our homes as well, which is also a really unique aspect, which we can talk about at a different time. But I think that also provides some opportunity for us. But because the clients are having those conversations, what an opportunity for us to really heed those conversations and give them some great advice during this time.
Erica, does that resonate with the clients who are coming in the door at Moss Adams?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Shannon, you made some great points there, and I hadn't thought about it in that light, but I like that, thinking about coming into our own homes. And so, yeah, I don't think I'd have anything further to add there. The only thing I put more emphasis on is, and this is kind of percolating through this entire conversation, is folks feel like they're more willing to have conversations at large in general. So, whether it's the shift in movement or family changes, or I was on a prospects call yesterday, and the amount that they divulged over the phone, not seeing, being present, was radically different than what it would have been 5 years ago. And so I think, as RIAs in general, how do we capitalize on that to make sure that the needs are being presented? And so how do we meet those needs in this current landscape? And then, Nick, I hope you're right that it will all go back to the demand to be in the city in the future. But it is an interesting time period that we can think about, well, how do we innovate differently and how we serve those folks? So I'm not answering your question, Alex, but I'm bringing together the different comments that folks are making, and it makes a ton of sense.
No, that's very good. No, I think this is a really interesting thing to talk about, is the changes that we're seeing and how firms can capitalize. I'll ask you, Scott, how are you seeing dynasty firms capitalize on the changes that we've been talking about?
Yeah, sure. Just to tap into what Shannon and Erica were talking about, just about having these conversations with clients, right? And so multi-generational planning, going down 2 and 3 generations in a family, making sure that you as an advisor are connected with the younger people in that family. And you have to meet those younger people where they live. They don't live the old stodgy way. They live electronically. They live with social media. They live digitally. They live a digital life, and you need to interact with them digitally, or else you're not going to get them when inevitably that wealth transfers. The huge transition of wealth that's about to occur, that's going to go to women as well, is something that a lot of our advisors are paying attention to. And I would say if you're not paying attention to that, you're totally missing a tremendous opportunity to have a significant positive impact on people. That is a massive wave of wealth, that the likes of which we may have never seen before, that's going to happen as well. And then I would say, you know, with our RIAs, when they launch, their clients are ecstatic. And if a client had, say, 3-4 different providers before, they tend to consolidate those assets inside of the single RIA. So there's opportunity, and it all comes from the fact that we're all living through this tremendous uncertainty, right? We've all lived through this, and people want to have those conversations, like Erica had mentioned. And so it's on us to make sure that we're having those conversations.
Interesting. And Shannon, I know that you think about that kind of transition, that wealth transition, a lot at Beacon Point.
Well, we actually been thinking about it for a decade, which has been great. I think we were a little bit early, and we got a little bit of a pushback early on when we decided we wanted to launch programs directed toward women. And we found that, you know, the industry wasn't quite ready for that. But I think it's absolutely needs to be a focus point of the organization to, you know, empower and educate women so that we're getting more women to the investment table. We launched our Women's Advisory Institute, I don't know, in 2012, 2013, really geared toward bringing women again to that proverbial investment table. Now I think what we're seeing in this environment is that women are coming to the table because they're there in the room, and we're able to have the conversation with, you know, potentially both spouses in the room, where that has not historically necessarily been the case. So I think it's a significant opportunity, and I think it's incumbent upon our industry. I think we have a unique opportunity as an industry to really encourage more women in the business. And I think during this environment, it's shown that actually more women can come into this business, and it is a business where you can have your kids in the same room and still be doing your job as a wealth advisor. So I think that's unique, and I think we will get more women in this business because of this environment.
Interesting. Erica, do you see it the same way?
Oh, absolutely. I'm waiting for my kids to come in behind me at any point now to represent that. But yeah, no, I think I 1,000% agree with what Shannon is saying, and I do think it's an opportunity, whether it's women or just diversity in general. That's been a large focus of ours as a firm. We've all read all the studies, and I think implicitly understand and agree that if you can create a diverse culture within your business workplace, you're going to have faster, better, stronger results. And so I don't think that's new by any means, but I do think 2020 brought that to the table in a very prolific way, in saying, well, so what are you actually going to do? How are you going to do that? How are you going to attract women talent? How are you going to attract folks of color or LGBTQ or whatever it might be, because that is what's going to be transformative to our industry. I think it's also going to resonate, or does resonate a ton with our clients, to be able to show that diversity of thought and leadership is incredibly important to us, and hence it's important to them, individually, and how we're serving them, one by one. So it's this kind of, I guess, mass impact, but also individual impact that I think, for whatever reason, 2020 has brought that closer to our forefront, and what our attention and our focus is on.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think there's been, a wave of interest and understanding about the importance of diversity and of inclusion as well, which has been an interesting conversation. And in terms of regionally, I'm interested, Shannon, because we're talking about the West, but we're really talking about opportunities across the country. And I know Beacon Point has entered into new markets through a lot of acquisitions. How do you look at that? Like when you're looking at not to get too specific, but if you're looking at a market, how do you know this is actually a good place for us to be? This is a place that there should be a Beacon Point office.
Well, we're obviously looking at the statistics within the market, based on what our clientele looks like. But I think that the most important thing is the right cultural fit, right? I mean, if we get the right cultural fit within, I don't really care where the office is located, as long as we've got the right people. And our first 3 screens are no jerks, no jerks, no jerks. As long as we get an office that has got some great people in it, we're happy to step in there and help them accelerate growth through a number of different ideas that we have within the organization, whether it is our Women's Advisory Institute or our impact investing or our holistic planning that they may not have otherwise had access to. We're happy to come in and help them accelerate growth. But I think it's really important to, we want to be in great markets where we see fast client acquisition and fast client growth. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean clients. I mean, areas like California, where we've got people leaving the particular state, that there aren't great opportunities. I mean, there's still some massive transfer of wealth going on in California, and California is not. I mean, I don't think it's going into the Pacific Ocean. Hopefully, it stays, and we still have clients in California. And I just think that there are opportunities across the country, regardless of area.
Scott, the same question for you. Are there places where first of all, how do you assess a place regionally or locally? And are there places where you've been impressed or surprised by the extent of the opportunity, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, look, the opportunity is big. It's growing in terms of acquisition candidates, merger candidates for our existing RIAs. We actually think that we're going to half of what we do this year will be through mergers and acquisitions into our existing RIAs. In terms of regionally, really, I agree with Shannon. Like all of our RIAs are planning first people. They start with the plan that's geared toward finding solutions for their underlying families. And so it's really what Shannon said, it's the cultural fit first. And then I think everything else kind of follows after that. If you get the culture wrong, it's not going to work. So I don't think there's a regional specific. I will say that we don't currently have an RIA in Colorado, and I've been impressed with the people that I've been meeting in Colorado as just one example. But yeah, culture first, economics second, and the biggest mistakes I see in mergers and acquisitions are people that reverse those 2 things, and they're too focused on economics and not enough on culture, and inevitably doesn't work.
Interesting. Yeah, and just for fun, Nick, because I know you look at this in terms of if people are leaving California, I'm curious where they're going and where you're seeing opportunities.
Yeah, thanks. Listening to this conversation reminds me of one of the panels we did a few weeks ago, where the difference between this conversation and that conversation was that in that conversation, there was a clear winner, people were excited. We were talking about opportunities in the South, and it was clear that there was this belief that RIAs looking in a place like Miami or Palm Beach, there was opportunity based on the migration trends that we talked about earlier in this panel and that have been reported on. And I think what's interesting about the conversation with the West is that even though there are some signs that there's migration and they appear to be meaningful, the jury is kind of still out. So even take where I live here in Los Angeles, even though there's been a lot of out-migration, there's been some high-profile out-migration, the young people definitely left. I've also seen signs of the reverse, where people are coming from places like New York and San Francisco to LA. So that there might be a sense in which LA is a net beneficiary of the changes, even though the state or maybe one region of the state, the Bay Area, is going to do worse. But in the West, I don't know if we can include Texas. I got to think that given the types of companies that are relocating and the types of individuals that are relocating to a place like Austin, that seems like a place where you'd want to have exposure, because it's going to be individuals who are going to very suddenly probably come into large pools of wealth, and they're going to need sophisticated advice. And that's probably true of other places too, to the extent that the Bay Area population really does permanently relocate to places like Tahoe and San Francisco, you're going to want to have, exposure to those individuals when you're trying to grow your RIA business.
Yeah, Shannon.
I was just going to echo what Nick is saying. Is certainly, we've made 2 acquisitions over the last 12 months in Florida, 1 in South Carolina. We're doing 2 in Texas right now as we speak. There certainly, I think you want to go to where you see significant opportunity. But to echo what Scott and Eric have been saying as well, is that look, there's opportunity, and I think this is the message we need to say, because it's absolutely true, and we're seeing it across our offices. There's opportunity in every area. I think we just need to be maybe a bit more nimble and smarter about how we're gaining and attracting those assets. But I certainly think there's opportunity in virtually every market. Now, I mean, virtually every market. I'm not going to say every single market is doing as well as some of these markets that are seeing a massive influx of clients. But most markets are doing exceptionally well, especially for those who have a consistent strategy and are doing that holistic planning, and really meeting the clients where the clients' needs are at this moment in time.
Interesting. Alex, if I
sorry,
just
ahead,
one second on that point, just a couple with like Nick and Shannon on this. I do think from a talent perspective, talk about an incredible opportunity, because some of these markets that you're referencing, at least what I've seen, is more traditional brokerage type environments, not RIA planning oriented environments. And so if you're a young person and you're wanting to advance in this industry and you're in one of these markets, you're in a really incredibly unique position to one, be acquired, hopefully hired by a firm, but to grow and develop as a result of that, because they are maybe less into the norm of what you see in the major metro markets on the RIA front. So there's a neat arbitrage opportunity in there from a talent development standpoint.
Yeah, I'm wondering what it's like for firms in markets that are less established, or where independent advisors are less established. Whether it's more difficult to even as we know, it can be difficult to explain to clients the difference between an RIA and a broker and a fiduciary and a wirehouse, and SEC has not necessarily made it a whole lot easier for clients. But I'm curious whether and anyone can jump in on this, whether it's more difficult to have those conversations in markets that are a bit less established.
I'm happy to jump in there. I think this is where you see the rise of the national firm. And since you're speaking with 3 of us that are running national firms, I think that's where our expertise comes in. I think when you're in a less established market, having a national firm working with you and giving you additional talent and resources to surround that organization has been extremely beneficial. Or even just on the recruiting side, or centralizing part of your functions within your particular office in a region that allows for more growth or has more talent within that area, I think has been very beneficial from the national platform side.
Interesting. And just to follow up, Shannon, I'm curious, because as you bring in clients in different regions, do you have different kind of marketing approaches, or different conversations with potential clients in different parts of the country, or how does that actually work in practice?
No, I mean, in practice, I think our conversations are generally the same. However, what's important to one office in South Carolina versus an office in Texas, may be vastly different. Somebody may be needing more planning to surround their existing offering, or somebody may need, more back office support or compliance to help round out so they can actually grow their business. So the conversations are generally the same. Again, it boils down to the no jerks, so that we've got really like-minded people trying to grow their businesses, and people that we, candidly, life's too short. We want to be working with people that, we want to be working with, and they want to be working with us to grow their business. But I think we round out offerings across the nation, depending upon what a particular office is looking for. Many times it's, hey, we need some additional growth strategies, or we need more of a media presence, and to be able to have that, and to be able to not to take the hat off of wearing the I'm the accountant in our office. I'm also the business development person. I'm also the compliance person. For us to be able to remove some of those pieces from their proverbial plate is I think has been very, very helpful.
Erica, I could see some of what Shannon said resonated with you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't have any further perspective there, but yes, I'm smiling because yeah, we deal with we all have the exact same I think opportunities. So challenges and opportunities, and how we go to market to expand in a meaningful way. And in some of these smaller markets, I do think it's been more opportunistic, but also more challenging in trying to create that knowledge and awareness of that opportunity. So I'm just agreeing with her, but I don't have anything smart to say.
No, that's very helpful. And Nick, I'm curious because we talked about regional specialties, but as Shannon and others have pointed out, you're able to reach clients across state lines and much more easily in this era. So, which perhaps allows the introduction of other specializations rather than my specializations that I'm based on Main Street and whatever town I happen to be in. So, Nick, I'm curious if you, when you think about industries that you might want to target as an advisor, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, before I answer that question, I just want to add one thing into this conversation in general about the national firms. As a sort of former insider and now outsider to the RIA space, it strikes me that the challenge with the industry and the creation of a national firm is similar to the challenge that my friends that I went to law school with are facing as lawyers, in the sense that like the go-to-market strategy is not like a consumer product company where you can like create a brand that people are going to pay attention to on a day-to-day basis, like a Starbucks or a Tesla or something. It's a much different strategy, right? So you're relying on like essentially intimate referrals of trusted it's like a trust network. That seems to be the way in which you grow a practice, like an RIA practice or a law practice. So I think it's challenging, and I think the space is wide open. Like nobody's really figured out how to really take that to market intelligently, in my view. And what's interesting is like these fintech companies are attempting to get into that missing market, and they're offering products to clients that may or may not be good, but they're approaching it like a consumer, which is what's interesting. So if you look at like Wealthfront, so that's just one thing to add to that. And then to actually answer your question, I think the West Coast offers a pretty clear two opportunities that you have to pay attention to. Number one is the creative class. So these are individuals who are working in Hollywood type fields, and the reason you have to pay attention to them is because it's an absolute boom, and these are individuals who, unlike people in sort of normal careers, they have a very interesting trajectory in that they could like make nothing for years, and then all of a sudden they get to be a writer on a show that has 10 seasons on Netflix, and then they wake up in year 5 and they're multimillionaires, and they really don't have the same kind of network that would allow them to meet folks who have sophisticated financial wisdom or sophisticated financial contacts. And I've noticed that in my own life. My kids are in preschool, and a number of his friends' parents they fit that cohort. They're in their late 30s, early 40s. They're making great living now, and they just don't have the same network that you would if you went to Wharton or something and followed a traditional career. So I like the creative class. And then the other thing that I'm noticing, and this is really taking off now because of the liquidity that we see in the market with the SPAC booms, there's a bunch of relatively young people and young families who are in tech and tech related fields who are coming into liquidity in massive amounts at all at once. And it's happening more and more. And these are people who like, it's amazing. Like I've one friend of mine who was part of the DoorDash IPO, and pre-DoorDash, he's on, like, he has an account on Robinhood, and then the DoorDash thing happens, and all of a sudden he can't in good faith like put all that into Robinhood. So he's thinking differently about his financial situation, and rightly so. And so I think those are two areas that I would focus on.
Interesting. And Shannon, I'm just curious what you're seeing in terms of either serving clients from those industries or opportunities you see across industries in the West.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we're West Coast specific, I think certainly those two industries are flourishing. The tech industry, absolutely. You know, we've got two offices, or soon to be two offices, up in the San Jose area, and that's, you know, primarily the clients they serve. And you're right. I mean, the tech industry is making new millionaires, you know, every day. And I think that we've got to go to, you know, where the puck is going, and that's where the puck is going as it relates to, you know, those coming into wealth in the state of California or on the West Coast. And I think you're going to see the same thing. We kind of included Texas on the West Coast. I'm not so sure about. I'm not sure they want to be included on the West Coast, but Nick, I think, did that earlier. I don't know, but I think you're seeing that in Texas as well. So I mean, I think those areas are extremely important, and the financial services area, right? I mean, I think many people in the financial services area are doing extremely well. Not necessarily. I mean, I think in the wealth management area as well, but you're not going to necessarily go to a competitor for your wealth management assets. But I think that, you know, making a focus on the financial service area is also a key area on the West Coast.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Texas, because we knew it was Northeast, but then we did the South, and we're like, is Texas in the South? And we're like, not really. Texas in the Midwest? Well, not really. We should have just done a fifth stop, honestly, and just done Texas. But Scott, I want to let you get in here.
Yeah, sure. I'll just share a couple themes that I'm hearing when I engage with our network partners at Dynasty within technology. So, you know, what we've been through this past 12 months, a lot of eyeballs on screens, right? So anything that has to do with streaming, anything that has to do with e-gaming, anything that has to do with e-gambling, even, I'm hearing a lot about. So, I mean, like, I don't gamble, but, you know, I am an investor. So it's interesting to see how much that's growing. And there are a variety of different ways to look at that. But the reality is that there's just going to continue to be massive amounts of wealth created by those industries. And if you're not paying attention to it, I think you miss out.
And Erica, same question. I'm curious what industries you're seeing opportunity and wealth items.
Yeah. So we've, in the last couple of years, so pre-pandemic, but I think it suits us really well post-pandemic. We've organized by what we term as national practices that are kind of meeting what Nick and Shannon are talking about, and Scott as well, in that we have a group of people that are experts with and for executives. So we train our people up in that way. How do you go to market with executives that are publicly traded companies, in this case, primarily technology? What does that look like? How do you train yourself as an advisor? We do that on the business owner front as well. And then we do that with individuals and families. So those are our three national practices. And then again, kind of creating those resources to expand our teams and their knowledge. Because if you're talking to whatever, the DoorDash person in NorCal versus here in Seattle, a three-generation owner-managed business, they're different conversations. And so how do we create skill sets and tools for our folks to be able to excel in those environments? So, and that's been, it's taken us a little bit of time, but our teams are resonating really well with that. And then as we go to market, they get it, right? If you're going to the DoorDash person, it's like, oh yeah, we already work with 10 other DoorDash people. We know everything about your plan. We know everything about whatever it might be. I haven't worked with the DoorDash person specifically, but you know, your RSUs, your stock options, we understand all of that. And then you can kind of leap over a realm there that you otherwise would be kind of learning from the forefront. So Alex, I'm tying it back to, I guess, how you train up your folks and your team and your talent, who is going to be your next generation to run those businesses, to be able to understand that.
Great point.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Scott, I'll let you come in.
Yeah, just to add on to that, was a great point by Erica. And you know, I think as an advisor, an RIA, to assume that young people or anyone really understands what an RSU is and how that works, how to deal with that, that you just can't make that assumption. There's an awful lot of education and positive impact advisors can have out here in the West, dealing with people that have massive amounts of RSUs and just don't even know really where to even begin. It's a very big opportunity. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and boy, isn't that a great example of the value that that an advisor or financial planner can add? Because if you do those stock options wrong, I mean, it's from a tax perspective, from how you're going to allocate yourself after the options vest. I mean, it's really incredible the opportunities that are created just by getting some frankly just sound advice. As we start to wrap up here, maybe we'll have a little fun. I'm going to challenge you all to think about how the RIA business in the West will change over the next decade. Okay, that's your assignment. How the RIA business in the West will change over the next decade. And Nick, I'm going to throw you under the bus and make you go first.
Okay. I'll make a bold prediction. Some firm is going to come up with a technological solution and go-to-market strategy that changes the way that RIAs are perceived. And that's how they're going to win a massive client share.
All right, okay. That's an interesting prediction. I like that. All right, who Scott? You look confident in your prediction. I'm going to go to you next.
I've got you fooled, Alex. So I think I agree with Nick. I just don't agree. I agree with you, Nick, that there will be technological innovation to approach a marketplace. I'm just not so sure it'll be to approach the affluent and the very, very wealthy people. They have continued to pay very well in terms of fees, RIAs that can give them customized objective advice, and they still do it today. And so I think, while I agree with you, Nick, I think there's still going to be plenty of opportunity for RIAs. And I think what you're going to see is a lot more of them, but you're also going to see a tremendous amount of consolidation as principals age out. I spend a lot of time doing succession planning. And we actually have an investment banking and M&A department now inside of Dynasty that helps with those types of transactions and looks ahead to the future of transitioning a business. But you're going to see a lot of consolidation in the RIA space. So that will manifest itself in regional firms and more national firms, in my opinion. And that will be prominent on the West Coast for sure.
Great. All right, Shannon, your prediction for the business of the next 10 years.
Scott stole a little bit of my thunder. I would have, my first reaction was certainly more consolidation. So yes, I believe we're going to continue to have consolidation. I do think there's going to be technological advances. I do think more advisors are going to focus on the female advisor, which I think is certainly necessary in this environment. And I do think the clients are going to demand more services. And I think they're going to demand more services because they can get us quicker and faster, and they're going to want more information about their financial landscape. And I think we've got to be prepared to provide those.
And Erica, your prediction for the next decade.
Okay, I'll step or leverage on both what Shannon and Scott just said. I think 100% agree in terms of more services, and that's a lot of stuff that we're looking into. But I think the ability to, and combine Nick's comments earlier, the ability to technologically express that to clients, there isn't anything, at least that I've seen, that is fully robust, fully compliant and safe, where we can go to market and say, hey, we can tie in every aspect of your financial life and show that on a whatever that might be, online or some type of reporting thing. So I think technology interface with clients is going to be critically important. Go back to the West Coast and executives in particular. They want information like this. And if we can't provide that, outside of course, they can see a snapshot of their portfolio, but if we can't provide a holistic sense of what they're asking in 2 seconds, I think we'll start to be behind the times there. And then so that's building off of what others have said. The other thing I would add that maybe it's a little bit different, I think the evolution of ESG investing is going to continue to be more and more predominant, and not just, hey, we know how to select a mutual fund because they do these screens, but more how do we have dedicated folks on our research and investment teams that are looking into that space as the world changes. And so I do think that's an area that's worthwhile at least exploring, if not investing in, to expand our horizons.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you know what? I think you guys all rose to that challenge. I'm very happy about that. So thank you all for joining us. We're unfortunately out of time, but Erica, Scott, Shannon, and Nick, this has been a lot of fun a lot of great insights from this panel, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having us,
Thank you.
Alex.
Thank you,
for
Alex.
having us.
Nice to meet you.
So everyone, I hope you enjoyed that. Please do complete your feedback, which can be found in the feedback area. The next session is at 2:20 Pacific with Harding Lovner. If you have any issues, you can contact Harley or Harriet. If you do feel the undeniable urge to tweet, make sure to use one of our hashtags, hashtag Citywire RIA or hashtag Citywire Virtual. I will see you for I think we're having a happy hour in a bit, so I'll see you for that. And for Citywire, I am Alex Rosenberg. Goodbye.